first and then we'll sing?
No, gong's after. He's got it.
Okay.
Music gets him to sit down.
You want gong first or song first?
Play.
We may want a gong and then do a piece. We're going to begin this morning as soon as people can settle on in. Boy, what a chatty, huggy bunch you are. We even tried the version that my mentor minister, the Reverend Carolyn Colbert, used to call it gonging them into submission. And we tried the gong, and people were enjoying their conversations too much to stop chatting. But what I want to invite you now to join us in song. It's our opening song. Please rise in body or in spirit. Gather the Spirit.
We join with other Unitarians in inviting the gong 3 times. We do that once in honor of those who have nurtured and lived on this land, the Cow Creek Indians, for many years, and for those Unitarians who came first and created our home. The second gong is for those of you who are here today, and the carrying on of that history that you will change, alter, grow, who knows. And the third gong is for those who will come and their dreams that may take us who knows where. Hi, my name is Lillian Fifield, and I am your service leader for today. We are missing what is normally our service program. Somehow it didn't get to me, and I would have been the one to print it since our office is closed. So, to make that just okay with everyone, I'm going to tell you step by step where we are. So I've announced myself, and now we're going to do a little bit about our services. We start with wanting you to know how welcome you are here. We know that we come from many places and along many different paths, bringing different truths and different backgrounds. But from wherever you come, you will find, we hope, connection, comfort, challenge, and love here. In our congregation, you can be yourself. And you don't have to do that by yourself. So you're welcome here, and good morning. I have a couple of announcements. Probably the biggest that all of you already know is that there is a congregational meeting following our service today, and all are invited. However, it is important to know and remember that only those who are members can vote. There'll be a sweet little lunch back there provided by our own Andy Abbott, who is a caterer, and we're grateful for that. So that will immediately follow the service, and the congregational meeting will start at 12:30 sharp. The other announcement has to do with something you've heard a lot about for a couple of years from Reverend Reynolds. It's a brochure that's on the back table about Elliott Institute. And that is a place that Unitarian Universalists and their families go during the summer a lot and other times to extend what it is that we as Unitarians love and enjoy about
And we have a
communion.
lot of fun there, too.
There's a voice in my back. We won't ask what kind of fun, but we've heard about those cabins and we've heard about late night kinds of things. So that's the end of the announcements. Much appreciation goes to our greeter, Al, and his having to explain to each of you that we don't have an order of service. And of course our media director, Jake Tranter, and our office administrator, Genevieve Gonzalez, and everyone else in this congregation that helps make things work. You already met our speaker today, who is Reverend Dennis Reynolds. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him now because I won't get a chance later, and I got the mic. Dennis came to the ministry after a 30-year career as a teacher and administrator at the University of Oregon. He's since retired to Eugene after serving churches in Oregon and Washington State as a hospital chaplain. He has been an activist locally and globally. He shows up with truth-telling and resistance as needed. Reverend Dennis believes the most powerful sermons are often those written with a religious text in one hand and the newspaper in the other, or some other current source of news. He enjoys lifelong learning and encourages that in others, and he enjoys the practice of crafting sermons and being our part-time minister. He joins me now for our chalice lighting. Reverend Dennis.
On this unique and lovely morning, we kindle this small flame.
In this beloved place we call home, we kindle this small flame.
This flame is but a flicker in an all too often dark and cold world, and yet
it is the spark that rekindles hope within our hearts and calls us towards compassion and loving action. Thank you, Kathy, for the chalice lighting. In our congregation, along with many other congregations in this city, we collect food, and if a couple of you could give me a hand with the baskets, we collect food for the Fish Food Pantry. In compassion and love for those in need, we appreciate your gifts of food and or money. Thank you so much. And now Reverend Dennis has a story or two for us.
As many of you know, this is the time I call Time for All Ages, and I typically bring a storybook to share with you. And I had picked one that would have been in the printed orders of service. It's from a collection of Leo Leone stories. I've shared with those folks before. I think Leone is a pretty profound theologian. And I picked a story I thought would match this week, and then, you know what? I changed my mind. So maybe next month I'll bring back the green-tailed mouse. Maybe not, but not this week. Instead, I have a couple of shorter versions of some stories I want to share with you. One of them is from sacred literature, and the other one is from here and now and right here. Okay, the first story is from the Hebrew Bible, what Christians often call the New Testament, and it's the story of Noah. You've probably heard it before. It's a pretty well-known story. In fact, I have a grandson whose name is Noah. Well, in the story of Noah, you may recall, it comes to Noah a sense that, as I describe it, climate change is happening. And there may be a great flood. And he calls together all the people around him to help him build an ark that will help them through the flood that he believes is coming. And guess what? It worked. They made it through. But they were also had extra wisdom because before the flood lifted the boat, they gathered 2 of each of the animals across the globe and loaded them onto the boat, all except for the unicorns who were off frolicking someplace, right? They made it. And after 40 days of 40 nights of rain, and who knows how long for the waters to actually drop, they don't tell us that in the biblical account. But I imagine it took a while. They settled on land on this mountainside. And I imagine all around them was pretty darn muddy. But they had a place to stay. They let the animals out, and they stayed for a time in the ark. And the biblical account doesn't talk very much about what happened next. And I like to envision what it might have been like. I think they stayed in the ark for a while. They had a place to stay. And maybe eventually they started taking the lumber to build something new. They began again. They survived and had the ability to begin again because they had put so much time and energy to build something to carry them into the future. The other story I want to share is a story about right here and now. You had a flood right there underneath your feet, and it did significant damage. And there was a period of time, it's like, what are we going to do? But fortunately, you had received a generous bequest. And rather than spend it on building a steeple or whatever beautification you might have done, it went into reserve funds. And now, when you need to do some changes, you've got those reserves. And in addition, years previously, folks had made other generous donations, which have been nurtured and invested in your endowment fund. So the arc of endowment, the arc of bequest funds have carried you into this new place and time, prepared to go forward. How that new beginning, that untold story will manifest with loving care for each other. Seeing you walk in this morning, you are a huggy bunch. It'll manifest through justice work and shared ministry within these walls and in the larger community. And what that will look like is yet to be known. But what I do know is you are going. Heaven knows where you are going. You will get there. Heaven knows how you will get there. But I know you will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but you'll get there. Heaven knows how you will get there, but we know we will.
Now is the time in our service when we have an opportunity to share our joys and concerns, if you choose, with each other. We do that with a candle lighting. So if you would like to do that, I ask that you begin a line over here on my right. That would be your left. And as you approach, the candles will be available. And of course, whatever you're lighting a candle for could be spoken or silent. It is at this time in our service when we pass baskets for the offering. The offering is that which you give to the church and helps to sustain us. So baskets are coming around, and we appreciate any donations that you can make. Thank you so much for your gifts. Now we have a meditation with Reverend Dennis, and I'll be back.
I'm going to go ahead and ask Jake to cue up a song that you also often do at this time too, because I think it's an important message about who you are as a people. From you I receive. Let's just stay seating and sing it as a centering hymn. Jake.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
I asked Jake to go ahead and do that piece because it also centers us in and settles us down. And I invite you now to settle even more deeply to a brief time of shared meditation. It's a simple movement meditation we've done here before. We begin with open hands, open to receive whatever comes, rainfall and sunshine, difficulties and joys, they all come to us. And in their own ways or sadness, we take them and hold them in our hearts until it's time to let them go, so that our hands may be open to receive yet again what comes next. So hands open for a moment. Breathe in, take it to your heart, hold it for a beat. Exhale and let it go. Open, receive, let it go. Be open, receive, hold it, let it go. In silence. Your pace doesn't need to match mine. We each receive and let go in our own time. Next time you get to open hands, I ask you just take some time, silence there. As we breathe together, open to whatever may come.
We now have a reading from St. Francis of Assisi, adapted.
Lord, make me an instrument of your peace.
Where there is hatred, let me bring love.
Where there is offense, let me bring pardon.
Where there is discord, let me bring union.
Where there is error, let me bring truth.
Where there is doubt, let me bring faith.
Where there is despair, let me bring hope.
And where there is darkness, let me bring light.
Where there is sadness, let me bring joy.
Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console,
To be understood as to understand.
to be loved as to love.
For it is in giving that one receives.
It is in self-forgetting that one finds.
It is forgiving that one is forgiven.
It is in letting go that one becomes open to accept.
It is in dying that one awakens to eternal life.
And now we have Reverend Dennis Reynolds and his sermon.
It was several decades ago when I first learned, at one point in time, had memorized that prayer of St. Francis, as it's called. It was decades ago, and I've pretty much forgotten it. It was part of a meditation class, one of my first and of several initially failed attempts to establish a meditation practice. I've gotten better since then. Memorizing that particular reading was part of a notion of focusing more deeply. And if I could remember to focus on those words, then maybe my monkey mind that chatters so much when I sit quietly wouldn't bother me so much. And it was partially successful. And as I noted, I've forgotten most of the words, but I've hung on to the essence. Lord, make me an instrument. Though I, as a Unitarian Universalist, tend to paraphrase it a little bit to a general calling to do good in the world, to do the good that divinity might wish here and now on this place. I still find the exemplary model of the humble Francis of Assisi, who sought to live in harmony with all life, as inspirational to me. I have a statue, concrete statue of that particular saint out in my garden. He's holding in his hands a concrete bird. I placed it right next to the bird feeder, where Francis metaphorically feeds the bird, and I actually give them some real seed. They're not kind to the statue sometimes. So, when the recently deceased Pope Francis I selected that saint's name as his papal name, I wanted to kind of pay attention because Francis's message was always pretty special to me. So I paid attention to this new leader of the Catholic Church, and his elevation was historic in multiple ways. He was the first Jesuit, an order that's often been dedicated to teaching. And he was the first from Latin America. And it's there where in the Catholic Church, a liberation theology that centered the serving the poor and marginalized had emerged. Though Pope Francis would hardly be described as a staunch liberationist theologian, elements of those teachings are in his views. He said, concern for the poor is in the gospel. It is in the tradition of the church. It's not the invention of communism and must not be turned into an ideology, as has sometimes happened in the course of history. I find those words about ideology certainly seem prophetic in our time. Excuse me. It gives you a chance to share a sticker I got at a march in Eugene, where somebody had a sign that read, "Jesus was woke." Anyway, back to the sermon. In his encyclical in 2015, encyclical is a papal formal letter to the world entitled Laudato Si, which means praise be thee. It was subtitled On Care for Our Common Home. In it, the Pope criticized consumerism and irresponsible economic development, laments environmental degradation and global warming, and calls all people of the world to take, quote, swift and unified global action. People of many faiths were enthralled by his writings. On Whidbey Island, where I was serving the congregation there, an interfaith study group met in multiple churches, and one chapter at a time, we explored that encyclical letter and discussed how we might take action based on what we were learning. The encyclical was something remarkable. Francis was someone remarkable. I remember him, too, as the one, when asked about blessings for LGBTQ folks, said, "Who am I to judge? Who are you to judge? I thought you were the Pope." I thought that's what the Pope was all about. Well, not Pope Francis. My Whidbey Island Quaker friend, Tom Mule, who hosted one of those study sessions, wrote, "Pope Francis was trying to show the world with consistent and humble intent that we can stand up to the temptations of privilege and power as he did, by his clear and courageous teachings and by embracing practices consistent with his message. And we can do the same. We too can learn to walk humbly and persistently into a future ultimately emanating from love and mercy, which is part of the prophetic tradition. I am grateful," Tom said, "for this tradition, and I pray that it will somehow continue to challenge us and inspire us to follow it." It seems now that the new American and naturalized Peruvian citizen Pope Leo XIV is not wholly dissimilar from his predecessor. Pope Leo, born Robert Prevost, many of whom's friends still call him Bob. I like the whole notion of Pope Bob. He grew up in South Chicago, and he's still reportedly a White Sox fan, which anybody who knows baseball shows that he's a man of deep and great faith. He's also the grandchild of a mixed-race Creole family that came north like many people of color during the migration of the earliest 20th century. It's a fascinating story as an aside. In the 1910 census, his grandfather, then living in New Orleans, was identified as a black man from Haiti. In 1910, he was identified as white from the Dominican Republic. Such is the history of race as a construct in America. But they went north, and the family thrived there. He began, Bob, we'll call him Pope Leo now, because that's what he's asked us to do, began his clerical career doing missionary work in rural Peru. He came up through the ranks to the highest level in the church, and yet he still, like me, reportedly does Wordle every day. He may be just the Pope we need in these times. In an editorial titled, "Trump is no longer the most important American," the writer David French offers that as one American steps onto the world stage as a man of malice, another American answers, leading with love and compassion. They represent two starkly different visions of American character, And if it all goes well, Leo will command the world stage long after Trump is gone from public life. May that be so. He continues, I don't know what kind of Pope Leo will ultimately become, but I have felt the cultural winds shift just a tiny bit. An American man who confounds political categories now leads the world's largest church. As a friend texted me right after the Pope's selection was announced, that shift feels almost like hope. Almost like hope. French asserts that the new Pope's views certainly do not fit within any kind of ideological frame. While many progressives appreciate his positions on climate and global economic realities, his views on the role of women, on abortion, and on LGBTQ issues echo the conservative teachings of the Catholic Church. Yet even when I disagree, I know his views are shaped by a sense of values rather than being merely transactional. I know I can certainly use more hope, or even more almost hope in these times, for the message of malice that keeps streaming out of Washington, D.C. can sometimes seem overwhelming. Hope and faith, especially when grounded by a strong moral foundation of core beliefs, is what I and the world most need right now. Unified by love, we can begin to identify and work with our differences and move forward. I hang on to hope, grounded by faith, because I've witnessed others whose faith-based work made a profound difference in the world. In particular, I want to lift up this morning a couple of powerful and inspiring Catholic women. First is Sister Simone Campbell and Sister Priscilla Dlamini. I met Sister Simone while I was serving on Whidbey Island. She was invited to speak by the same interfaith group that had sponsored the Laudato Si study groups. She shared with us stories from her work as part of Nuns on the Bus, a group of activist nuns who travel the country. They're still going on trips now and then, advocating for loving and compassion within and around the political process. Their focus areas have included support for the poor and for immigrant rights. Last fall's pre-election tour focused on simple voter registration. Not long before coming to Whidbey, she had been part of a group that had welcomed Pope Francis's visit to Washington, D.C. Sister Simone's dedication and commitment to justice certainly was in line with the liberationist theologies that I explored in my Unitarian Universalist seminary training. The strongest practitioner of faith-based social justice work I've been blessed to know was Sister Priscilla Dlamini. She was a Dominican nun who I met in South Africa. I had the good fortune to know Sister, as we call her, over a period of years. I heard about her first when my daughter Lindsay, back in 2004 as an undergrad, made a research trip to Holy Cross Hospice in South Africa. I spent time with Sister there at the hospice in 2009 and again in 2013. Sister, who's been given numerous humanitarian awards, described the beginnings of her programs. She said, I've had a vision of it for about 10 years, but of course, being a nun in a convent, I wasn't allowed to start anything. What I've been seeing here were people coming back home from big cities, already infected with HIV/AIDS. KwaZulu-Natal, the province where I live, used to be known as the AIDS Belt. It was a thorn in my flesh when I saw those people being rejected by the hospitals as well as by their families. After being rejected, they went to the sugarcane fields to die alone. I had a vision that I must give these people a home to die in peace, to have a dignified death. So I started to reach out to the chiefs, that's the nature of Zulu culture, and ask them if I could start something like that, and they allowed me. I was going from field to field looking for the people who were dying there by themselves. The bishop at the time was also very well versed in social development, so he took me around to look for a place to start this mission. We found an old, dilapidated building that used to be a stable. The bishop was reluctant to give me that space because it was in really, really bad condition. But eventually he agreed, and after a lot of work, we were able to admit our first patients, people with AIDS as well as those with chronic and terminal ailments like cancer. A hospice. I first visited Holy Cross Hospice in 2009. By then, Sister had established a creche, which is the South African word for a preschool, for the children of those whose parents had died from AIDS, because the elders were often at home and missing school themselves because they had to care for their younger siblings in these child-headed households. I've spent more time with her over the years. She came to U.S. once and came to Eugene as part of a fundraising tour, and I've traveled with her in South Africa, and I've taken additional trips to Holy Cross. I had the opportunity to offer trainings working with interpreters to Zulu preschool teachers. As I describe it, I taught them about neural development, and they taught me about what community really is like. Sister died in 2024. Now, sometimes I think, and other people might look at Sister as a saintly superhuman, but I spent enough time with her to know that she is fully human. She could be kind of bossy. Well, actually, more than kinda. And she was very opinionated. She got grumpy when dinner was late. And she had a too large collection of ceramic and toy penguins. I don't know why, but Sister Priscilla loved penguins. And she had a minor addiction to watching televised worldwide wrestling broadcasts. It was her guilty pleasure. Yet this fully human being who dedicated her life to her Catholic faith was called by her deepest values to make the world a better place for sick people and for their children. Instead of being deterred by patriarchal and cultural barriers to her vision, she made action her prayer and her sacrament. Her actions strengthened the commitment of many of us who sought to help her in the work. I've proudly been part of a nonprofit my daughter and another then student started called Timbanati, selling Zulu crafts from women's empowerment projects to help fund that preschool and others in South Africa. Faith empowered by justice. Faith empowered by justice. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The church must be reminded once again that it is not to be the master or the servant of the state, but rather the conscience of the state. To call for justice because our faith calls us to do so." That's especially true in these troubled times. Church is a container for values, a container for a community, and a container for faith. That's true in the Catholic Church, that's true in progressive Christian churches, and it's true in liberal faith communities across traditions, and it's true in the Unitarian Universalist Church. It's about what we do, not just what we say we believe. As we've explored here before, it's not just about the orthodoxy of one's belief, it's about the orthopraxy of one's practice. True action is far more important than true belief. We Unitarian Universalists proudly proclaim that we are a church where deed is more important than creed. Though she might be a bit frustrated with me when I compare her to a Hindu teacher, I offer that Sister Priscilla put into action Gandhi's admonition to be in the world what you want to see in the world. She acted to put into reality her deepest calling. And we are called. We're all called. For some, that call comes from deep within. From some, it may come for an entity out there that I call the great mystery. But we are called. We're called by faith in ways large and small to do our part. So listen to your calling, whatever its sort, and then act to do good in the world. For some, it's advocacy. For some, it's political action. For others, it's service in the community or to this beloved congregation. For some, it's generosity, both financially and by offering a generosity of spirit, by simply cutting others some slack. And sometimes, most importantly, the often challenging of work of doing the same for oneself. For some of us, it's all of the above. Be in the world who you are called to be in the world. I'd like to close this morning with the words of Hildegard of Bingen, an amazing mystic, theologian, and powerful voice in the 12th century Catholic Church, who called us, dare to declare who you are. It's not too far from the shores of silence to the boundaries of speech. The path is not long, but the way deep. You must not only walk there, you must be prepared to leap. You must be prepared to take a leap of faith. May it be so. May we make it so. Thank you. Now, as the tradition of this congregation is a time for commentary, congregational conversation, if you wish, or we might just sit for a minute and see what rises. The Quakers would do that for a long time.
I was listening to what you were saying, and what you were saying about Donald Trump and Pope Leo and the sister that did the hospice, and it seems to me it's almost interchangeable with faith and hope. With faith comes hope, with hope comes faith. And something really struck me, that there's no longer Donald Trump as the most important person in America, but rather the Pope, and I suppose we could probably call him Bob Hope.
I hadn't got to that one, but it's like, I mean, it is a reality, and actually to get to the piece you lifted up before, for me, hope is when we act on our faith. Faith is orthodoxy. What do I believe? And hope is actualized. Hope for me becomes a verb. It becomes action. For me, it's based on faith. So that's why people in Eugene see this clerical stole show up at demonstrations and testimony to the county commission and stuff, because I want to know that there's a voice of faith that talks to values, and that's not just ideology. So thank you. And we got to keep some lightness about it all, too. We really need those and kind of comments in these times. That's why I was like, he does Wordle, all right. My kind of poem.
Yay, Wordle. Hi, I'm Lori, and you said keep it light, so I'm going to throw a little bit of,
Both and.
well, yeah, and might as well. And I know we're going to be staying after to have a light lunch and then journey into the congregational meeting. And I just want to throw in there that I think as long as we cut each other a little slack, we're going to get through this and we're going to make it together. And I feel so hopeful and thankful. That's all.
Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will.
I have a comment I'd like to make. I made a decision when Trump was elected that I couldn't not do what's in my heart to do. And so some of you know I've cut back on my activities here. I cut back on Sunday services, and I need some of you to step forward and fill that role. And I decided to do what I have to do, what my heart requires and my life work requires me to do. So I have joined the coordinating group for all of the marches that are going on, along with the Democrats, along with Indivisible, Shades of Blue, and we are the only church. And what I need to do, what I feel drawn to do, many of you may have noticed on Facebook, but I do two things. I put out all kinds of messages that are positive, all kinds of messages drawn to self, to keep one connected to self while you're standing out there. And I think I've had an effective role in working with others in keeping our marches as a stand-up of principle. We don't yell, we don't rally, we don't call names. We've also added a wonderful activity, and that is about half the marchers, the protesters, toward the end, sort of break off and they make a long journey from BLM, which is almost the freeway, all the way down one side of Garden Valley to Fred Meyer's, and they cross over the street and they make it back up. We're showing up over 1,000, and I invite you to join us. It's good for the knees. One can get rid of the crutch sometimes. However, more important than that, don't stay away because you're old. JC and I got chairs, and we've been joined by lots of others with our chairs, sitting there making a statement. And more importantly, being there for all the young people who not in their lifetime, they didn't do Vietnam, they didn't do other things, to be an anchor, to be a person that they just might sit and talk to, or you might start talking with them. And my next project is, I hope to work on here at church, but also within our group, and that's the whole topic of sanctuary. We as marchers see ourselves as providing sanctuary. And how will we work with the next march that comes up when the focus is on immigration and everything that's going on there? And I'm hoping that this church and other churches will join in the idea of providing some kind of sanctuary.
Yeah,
So,
and
thank you.
Right, and you answer the call in many ways, and sometimes it is showing up. I was helping set up last night. The Eugene Church sponsored the Queer Prom, and I was part of the team that was hanging the disco ball beforehand. Right? That's the way I volunteer at my home church. I go Tuesdays and I pull weeds, and on a Saturday I hang the disco ball. That's how I do church in terms of orthopraxy. My orthopraxy was hanging the disco ball. But one of the people I was working with said, they notice at the demonstrations when we show up in our yellow shirt, they said, oh, the love people are here. And there's nothing more than I would like to be known as one of those folks who are part of the love people. And my only yellow T-shirt, it doesn't say Eugene on the back. It says Umpqua Unitarian Universalist. So I show up with this shirt. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up for each other, because this is where it begins. This is a practice place where how do we do disagreements grounded in love, you know? If we agree in love, no other disagreement will do us harm. That's John Murray way back in our Universalist history of this faith tradition. And it may be for you, it's write a letter. It may be for you, it's go to the streets. It may be for you, reach out to a neighbor and just saying, help me understand how you got to where you are, and how do you feel about cuts to staff for Veterans Administration. Look for those common places that you may talk about, and to not be the most strident voice. There are plenty of strident voices in the culture. Let's bring up a different energy. And that's what I loved of the contrast that French, the writer, lifted up about what kind of American values are on the world stage now. There are two versions. And I like that version that's faith-based rather than transactional. So, at any rate, I think we're ready
have a song.
to sing again. This particular song was written by Shoshana Friedman, Rabbi Shoshana Friedman, and her husband, Yotam Schechter. The sing-along version that we're invited to do, it doesn't have the lyrics, but you get it pretty quick. It's what they call a zipper song. You just repeat some phrases and zip some different things into it. And this particular video is at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., and the guitarist and folk singer singing along with her is the Unitarian Universalist minister, Fred Small. So please rise in Bardian spirit and join Shoshana and Fred in singing "The Tide is Rising."
I'm Rabbi Shoshana Megara Friedman from Temple Sinai in Brookline, Massachusetts. This is my friend, the Reverend Fred Small. The tide is rising, and so are we. We are rising up with bold, political, faith-based action on climate, and we are a singing movement. Please rise in body or spirit and join us. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The tide
I first learned that song on the streets at a demonstration. It has that energy. Please remain standing for our closing words of benediction.
Our words are by Maureen Killorn. As we weather winds of change, may we have the wisdom to cherish moments of stillness.
As we recollect times of challenge and pain, may we remember also the blessings of our lives.
As we look to future unknowns, may we have the boldness to trust that there is an unimagined good yet to come.
Salam.
Shalom.
Amen.
Blessed be.
And as is the tradition of this congregation, I invite you to join hands as you feel comfortable and join in a circle for the closing song, Go Lift It Up.